Hey guys, Mr. Bowman here. Today's learning objective is on the left. We are learning to identify the features and equations of circles. And this is a new type of graph. We didn't learn this in our previous topic. Let's get into this. And to help illustrate, I've got two things that we need to understand. I've got the formula or the equation on the left-hand side. That looks a lot different, and I'll explain what everything means. And we're going to use Desmos to assist our understanding of this. So what I'm going to do, we're going to underline three things. So we all know what x is. X relates to the number on the x-axis. We all know what y is. Y relates to the number on the y-axis. And here where the waters have been muddled a bit, and we have a, b, and c as well. And we're going to explain what each of them means, and we'll write down some notes as we're doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in the most basic of circle equations. So we've got x squared plus y squared equals 25. Or let's actually change that 25 to the form r squared. That would be 5 squared. So they are the same thing. So what we've got is x squared, y squared, and 5 squared. That gives us a perfect circle centered around the origin, 0, 0, with a radius of 5 in each direction. But what we see here is we've actually we've got plus 0 and plus 0 as well. So like our parabolas, like our cubics, like every other function we've done, we can put things in the brackets to help move around our equation. So let's have a look at what we do. So if we put in plus 1 here, what we can see that center's actually been moved to -1. And like we did with the other one, let's say we put -2 by the y, and we can see the center has now been moved up to negative or to +2. So they kind of work the same as our parabolas. They work in opposites. So the a value, so just to summarize, the a value is the x movement. And it's really important to note that they work in opposites. And the y, or the b, is actually the y movement. And it's really important to remember, like the x, that is opposites as well. And the last one to note, that's relatively straightforward. That relates to the radius as well. So what we want to do is we're going to mess around with this. So let's get back to our default equation. So x squared, y squared, 5 squared. So we've got a circle centered around 0, 0. So how would we maybe shrink that circle? We would shrink that circle by having a smaller radius, which would maybe be reducing that 4 or reducing that 5. Maybe we make that a 4. So we can see that blue circle has a radius of 4. And maybe, let's say we moved it to 3. There we go. And we can make it smaller again. Make that 2. There you go. And then finally, we could make that 1 squared as well. So we can make the circle bigger and smaller by changing the size of the radius. And just as another example, let's make that 8. There you go. We can see the black circle around the outer side now. So that changes the size of the circle. So let's get rid of all those. We can also move the circle left and right. So let's move that to the left. So we're moving it to -1. So that means it becomes +1. Let's move it across even more. Let's move it to 2. And we can see we've moved it across. Okay, well, let's move it the other way now. So we want to move it to the center of a +1. So let's make that -1. And we can see the green circle now has a center at -1. And then we can see -2. Again, that new purple circle, it's got a center of 2. We've now seen that moved over more. So hopefully you can see what the a does. And finally, let's delete all those. Let's play around with the y value. So let's move the y value or the center to perhaps +3. So +3, we're dealing with opposites, -3. So we can see it's moved up. Well, let's move that new graph down 1. So that would become -2. And we can see it's been moved down. Let's move it down again, -1. If we moved it down further, we'll get back to our original graph. We could even make it the center below the x-axis by doing +1 with that green circle. And we can move it down even more, +2. So we can see we've moved it up and down. And all of those are based on the center of it with the reference point at the origin of the graph. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to have a couple circles on our Desmos, and we're going to get into identifying the equations of those given circles. Okay guys, we're back and we're back on PowerPoint, and what I'm quickly going to do is just to recap, I am going to jot down the circle formula just to use as a tool to assist us with coming up with the equations of these 4 graphs. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do them in order. We're going to start off with the purple graph. And the purple graph, the first step you always need to do is find the center of that graph. And it looks like it's down there. And what we're going to do, if we have a look in every direction, it looks like it has a radius of 2. So that means our r value from our original equation will be 2. We then need to have a look at the x value or the x-axis. How much has it moved left or right? And in our case, it hasn't moved left or right. So that means our a value will be equal to 0. Apologies about that funny a. And finally, we need to see how much has it been moved up or down, because that relates to the b value. And we can see it's been moved to -2. And remember, when we're dealing with inside the brackets, we're dealing with opposites. So the opposite of -2 is +2, which means b will be +2. So that means the equation of the purple circle will be x squared plus y plus 2 all squared, and that will be equal to 2 squared. Or you could change that to 4. So that would be the equation of the blue one, or the purple one, sorry. All right, let's jump into the blue equation. So first step again, find the center of that equation, and I'm drawing our center there, and that looks like it's at 4, 0. And we can see in all directions, that circle has a radius of 1. So our r value will be equal to 1. We then have to have a look at the x-axis, or how much has it moved left or right from the origin. In our case, it's moved all the way to +4, and we're going to be converting that to the opposite of -4. So that means our a value will be -4. And finally, we then look at the y value. How much has it moved up or down? So it's still sitting at 0. It hasn't moved up or down, which means our b value will be equal to 0. And that gives us enough information to find the equation of the blue graph. So in our case, it's going to be x minus 4 all squared plus y squared plus, not plus, equals to 1 squared. And again, you can just change that to the number 1. So we've done the blue one. Let's get into our black equation, or our black circle. So first step, find the center. The center looks to be here, so that we can see it's been moved up and down and left and right this time. Let's find the radius. So if we go across, that's 3 units, 3 units, 3 units, 3 units. So I'm happy r would be equal to 3. We then need to look at the x-axis. How much has it moved left and right? So in our case, it looks like we've moved across 2 units, which means a will be equal to +2. And the reason it's +2 is because our center is at -2. And then finally, we have to look at the y-axis. So we've been moved up to +1, which means our b value will be the opposite of that, -1. And that gives us enough information. Let's put that into our equation. So it's going to be x plus 2 squared plus y minus 1 all squared, and that will be equal to 3 squared. And again, we're going to change that to the number 9. And the last equation we're going to look at is the red one. So hopefully we get the hang of it. First step, let's find the center. So I'm going to draw the center in. That looks to be at 5,3. We can figure out the radius from here. So it looks like it's 4 units in all directions. So our radius will be 4. We then have a look, how much has it been moved up or down? Or sorry, not up or down, left or right. So it's been moved along the x-axis to +5, which means the a value will be -5. And it's been moved up to +3 along the y-axis, which means the b value will be -3. And finally, we can plug that into our equation. So x minus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared, all of that is going to be equal to 4 squared. And again, let's get rid of 4 squared. We can just change that to 16. Hopefully you found this video on determining the features and equations of circles useful. Now let's get into heaps of practice.